Okay, hello, that's right, Nick Dutch back on the camera yet again. How the hell is it going? Just continuing my theme on magic, which is one of the things I talk about because, as part of my personal history, it's something which I identify with to a certain degree. And I'd like to talk a little more about what magicians, in inverted commas, would have been in the old days. Now, we've got records going back to the medieval period, and the priest class would, of course, even in this country, even in the United Kingdom, would be privy to their own sort of special or sacred knowledge or specific knowledge that they had. And prior to the days of empire and exploration throughout the whole of the world, there were various peculiar beliefs about different types of creatures and people who lived in various parts of the world, including the dog-headed people. And there was a lot of speculation about these people, as were they modest, did they have language, could they be regarded as having a soul. These people had, of course, never been seen, but for some reason it was believed and assumed by the upper crust, the intelligentsia of society, that these people did exist, and that the part of the process of going through, exploring the world, was to try and find these dog-headed people and to try and convert them to Christianity. This was a form of, I suppose, proto-science. Now, proto-science is what came before science. One of the people who helped to initiate real, proper scientific investigation was Nicholas Culpeper, who was a great herbalist of his time. His writings was a combination between what could be described as superstition, because he uses astrology to describe the properties of various herbs, as well as science. There's a key phrase, a key part in his herbal in which he talks about tobacco, and says that many people have suggested that tobacco is good as it wards off the plague. But he then goes on to say there were many people who died in the plague who were great smokers of tobacco. So in that particular case, he's showing that there is evidence which counteracts a particular assumption. Now, proto-science has, by its very nature, some varieties of religious associations. Proto-science, being the thing which came before science, would of course be the preserve of a certain small group of individuals within every society. These people would be working with or for the rulers. They would probably even be called magicians, and they would be essentially the scientists or alchemists of their day. Now, even in those times, there would have had to have been exploration, investigation, creating experiments with controlled conditions to see whether a particular hypothesis was worthwhile considering to be a theory. But despite that, because of some absences of the scientific process at that time, there were still strange beliefs that were held on to in quite a big way. Now, in modern times, these people, these great people who are seekers of knowledge, they still exist, but they're called scientists. After I personally had spent a lot of my time in the New Age community, I then went to university, and of course I had the great pleasure of seeing the massive multi-story library in the university, and going through all the various shelves and picking the books that I needed for my essays and projects and the rest of it. And my analogy then was that I was in fact being just like a magician in the traditional era, going to a place, a repository full of knowledge, and trying to find out more and build upon my own understanding of the way the world works. Because this tradition, so to speak, still exists, but it exists in the modern day scientists, and not the modern day occultists, New Agers, pagans, and the rest of it. Because magic itself was, and I suppose still is, an attempt to try and understand life. Now, sorry, you have to forgive me, I still have a terrible cold. Now, where I'm going with this video is to stay on the subject of magic. Because we've got to learn from the past, we've got to learn why certain ideas were eventually discarded. We've got to learn where there were some positives or benefits in the ideas within the proto-scientific era that could still be used. We've got to learn to what degree we can rely upon, trust, or use this information. And yes, we've got to do various forms of experimentation to understand and ascertain what we can actually achieve. Essentially, although being a person who considers himself to be an occultist and is trying to fulfill the requirements of magic, namely to have some skills and to improve them, as well as to continually search for the truth, I've got to improve my methods, and I've got to improve the way that I understand life, and I've got to be intellectually honest. I can't just believe in something. The constraints of labeling oneself as someone who is following an art and science are in fact really rather extreme. I have to understand scientific methodology. I have to be able to apply that to the things that I'm experiencing to the best of my ability within the limitations that I've got, and not to jump to too many conclusions. The absence of belief is essential, because otherwise, just like the proto-scientists, we'll end up assuming that, like in the example I've previously given, that tobacco is good against the plague, when in fact you could smoke all the tobacco in the whole wide world, and you would probably still end up with a plague if it was around today. So, it's more about applying scientific methodology to what we're experiencing, and learning that it is appropriate to be a disbeliever rather than a believer. Alright, we don't have to believe that there are dog-headed people on the other side of the world. We have been there, we have researched it. And there's a lot more which we as humans and we as a species still don't know. And so therefore we've got to carry on exploring in our own experiential artistic manner to try and find out more. Remember, if magic is an art and a science of causing change to occur in conformity with the will, we have to be able to show that we are being scientific, and to be able to demonstrate in what ways we're being scientific. Otherwise, we really cannot even hope to regard ourselves as magicians.